Great, the meeting is being recorded. It is December 11th of 2025, and Molly Rogers and I'll call the meeting of the Youth Development Council to order and start with roll call. And so I believe, Melissa, would you help us do the roll call?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Zan Oshiro.
Present.
Daniela Avila. Harsa Chanrami. Andrew Copeland. Yoselin de la Garza Hernandez Lopez.
Here.
Jenny Glass.
Here.
Alexander Johnson. Sorry, this is an old list. We have Alexander Robinson. Jeff Justison.
Oh yeah.
Here.
Sam Coe.
Yeah, here.
Nate Latanzio. Kim Le. Andy Leonard. Tabidi Lewis.
Present.
Christina McMahon.
Present.
Jeff Parker.
Jeff's present.
Savannah Relatas. Molly Rogers.
I'm here.
Sandra Santos. Hannah Schroeder.
Present.
Janelle Theobald. And that's the end of that. So I'll have to do a quick count. Nate Latanzio has joined us. Thank you.
All right, and it's great to see you, Tabidi, because I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know that you said you needed the annotated script, so I will hopefully somebody that will get that to you. But Tabidi, the meeting is yours. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to the quarterly meeting of December 11th, 2025, 10 a.m. We've taken the roll call, and the first item of the agenda will be the director's update. Brian, do you want to begin with the update of the
Yeah, Tamita, I can do that. I'll just also do these quick reminders for folks, for attendees and participants.
Oh, okay, I have that
You
too.
want to do that,
Yeah,
Tabi? Yeah.
So just a reminder for everyone in the meeting to say your name when you start speaking. And just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and that this is a formal advisory meeting of the state. And if you are a member of the public and wish to comment, there will be a public comment section of the agenda at the end of the meeting, and members of the public have up to 3 minutes in order to speak per person. And if you would like to comment, please send a chat to Melissa Gallardo so that she is aware that you'd like to speak. So just, reviewing the agenda, we're going to begin with the director's update. The Juvenile Justice Committee will give an advisory update, and we'll take a vote. And the NYEC Youth Days report will report out, and we'll have a youth grant update. We'll take a break at around 11:20. 11:30, we're going to have a working lunch, sort of a retreat recap. And then again at 12:10, future ready closeout report, and 12:40 committee updates will take place. So with that said, if I haven't missed anything, and I will slide your way, Brian, and ask you as a director to give an update.
Awesome. Thanks so much to BD. Again, Brian Detman, Youth Development, Oregon Youth Development Director. Just appreciate everybody's taking the time. Yeah, we got a lot on the agenda, but I think some of these items should go, you know, at 30 minutes, maybe some a little longer, some a little shorter, but we plan on getting you done at about 1 o'clock. Appreciate those who are in the room down in Salem. Thanks for making the drive. I just have a couple of items. There are two or three items to update folks on. Certainly appreciate that we had our learning and planning retreat a few weeks back. Just appreciate the energy, the thoughtfulness, the interaction, engagement that everybody brought to the table. Just reminding you all of our kind of three kind of pillars or imperatives of our plan are around prevention, intervention, not just, from a sort of programmatic standpoint, which we know are juvenile justice and county partners and many of the organizations that are served by our grants are doing, really important prevention work, really critical intervention and treatment related work. But just philosophically, we want to do what we can to prevent young people from hitting broader systems, or to the extent that they are involved in those systems, prevent them from penetrating, deeper into those systems, whether it be juvenile system, foster care, child welfare, et cetera. So that's one area. Prevention and justice. Connection and change is a big one for us, just around the relationships that we not only have with each other, but they're really prioritizing the relationships between young people and caring adults, between young adults and the peer support and peer mentoring that they're able to do. And again, back to the work that we do with each other. It was great to see a number of folks in person as a part of the retreat. We had a second day virtual / online, but we tried to really maximize our engagement and interaction while we were sharing that space. So we know that, development and change happens when folks are in really kind of those close, uh, partnership and relationship. And that is something we want to prioritize. And then the last one is equity and transparency. Want to ensure that we're achieving those long-term and sustainable outcomes for the youth and populations and communities we serve, and really being transparent about what that looks like, right? Did some of the technical details sometimes can be hard to follow, but they really matter. So we're excited to have our Juvenile Justice Committee share the juvenile detention guidelines work that's happened over the past, I don't know, probably a couple of years almost, right? 18 months or so. It's been a really robust and engaged process with stakeholders across systems. I'll let them speak more on the details, but just appreciate that really engaged, transparent process up until the last week. I know we were getting edits from some of our council members and so on. So we'll share more about our grants and what those things are looking like. So we are committed to that transparency and just telling folks kind of where things stand. A couple other notes just around budget. The legislature will have its short session in February and March 2026. Um, uh, we haven't been called to testify or asked to testify in any way or attend a committee hearing committee meeting. Um, at least not to this point. That still could come up. So we'll keep you informed to the extent that that may come up as an opportunity for us to share about our work. We did, work with the Department of Education and the governor's office, right, around a request that was made by the governor and also the legislature around a couple of budget reduction exercises. So we did a 2.5% reduction exercise and a 5% reduction exercise. I think I told this group in September and maybe also via email, that those exercises were on the table, and those things were sent in like the November timeframe. What we ended up putting forward was a reduction in some of our youth grants, specifically the grant around um, violence, gang violence, and youth violence prevention and reduction. That's a grant that we have yet to actually issue as an RFA. So if at a 2.5% level, that wouldn't be the full grant. The grant's roughly $800,000, give or take. So at 2.5%, we'd still have a little bit of money that we could figure out how to put out. But at 5%, that grant program wouldn't move forward. There are dollars that are remaining whole around the kind of East Multnomah County and City of Gresham effort, MOPI. I will, yeah, East Multnomah Outreach Prevention and Intervention. That's what EMOPI stands for. I think I got it right. Or maybe it's East Metro. I was East Metro or East Multnomah. That program is still funded and will be doing important violence prevention and intervention work in that area. So it's not statewide, but still there's some work happening there. So I don't have much more information around budget other than just to say that those reduction exercises have been completed and submitted, and then we'll await to see what the legislature decides in the winter. There was a budget forecast that came out in November that was better than the previous forecast. So we'll just continue to monitor and be really right diligent and smart about our own operational spending. And certainly you're going to hear a youth grants update from Paul here in a little bit, just about what work is happening with our dollars. One of the exciting things that I'll say about budget, and then happy to, if there are any questions or comments. But we did hear from um, our partner friends at the Oregon Department of Health and Oregon Department of Human Services that the Social Services Block Grant or Title 20 funds that are federal funds that come to ODHS and then eventually make their way to us, about $6 million or so dollars, that those were funded when the government came, when the shutdown ended. Cord gave I think, a really thoughtful and detailed explanation of that at the planning and learning retreat. We don't have a lot of time to go into the details, but those dollars look like they are going to flow. We will get that moving in early 2026, but that's 2025 grants that we will make early in 2026 that we had not planned to make, or we were holding back from making because we didn't know what was happening on the federal front. So that's really exciting. That's going to mean some really important work happening in communities. So I'm going to take a pause. I've said a lot about the budget. Are there any questions or comments on budget? All right. Not seeing any. I see Parasa has joined us. So Parasa, maybe here in a sec, we might turn it back to you after I'm done with my update. The last thing I'll say, and maybe whoever's controlling the like visual of the agenda, and Melissa, maybe it's Shanasia or Joy or somebody, it's fantastic, it's doing it. If maybe you could scroll, are the dates for our 2026 quarterly meetings on there?
They are
They are.
They are. I'm not seeing them in the I don't see them in this visual.
they are the next to last slide, Brian. Sorry. So I think it's slide 28, Tanisha.
Oh, so like way at the end?
Yeah. I don't know, Brian.
Yes.
What's that?
Sorry, I didn't know if you have the the link to the PDF that I sent this morning, or what's the best?
I do, but if
But to show it.
Gonna
I
mention
will,
it at
when we get to
of
the end of the
meeting.
meeting, we can tell you more details. Maybe Melissa, you can drop the dates into the chat.
Of course.
Can have that, but I'll just FYI, just keep your, March 12th, June 11th, September 10th, December 10th. Those are the dates. There they are. Thank you for putting those up. And then the retreat is going to be earlier in November, so we can avoid the Association of Oregon. And yep, you're welcome. And thank you. I know it's happened now a couple years in a row. We'll get it right in 2026. And just appreciate Molly and Jeff and y'all kind of made it work this year. So thanks for that. I'll say one of the things that we are thinking of doing is that the meetings, we will have a couple virtual or a couple hybrid and a couple in person, trying to get to, a couple times a year to one of our grantees or one of our, or one of our partner organizations or tribal government, as we're able to go out to Warm Springs in the fall. We'll probably, our thing is we're going to schedule these all as like a longer block, probably the 4 hours. Melissa, help me if I'm saying this incorrectly. You all are taking time to drive, and then sometimes you gotta, this is basically most of a day's commitment. So this year we said, hey, there's two 4-hour meetings and two 3-hour meetings. I think there'll be four 4-hour meetings in 2026. We will not try to overpack the agenda. We will, for those meetings that are, in person, we want to also allow for the visit or the tour or the program person to talk about their work. So those meetings will take more time, and we'll just incorporate that into the agenda rather than saying, oh, we're going to meet from 10 to 2 and then actually keep you there till 3 or 3:30. So we'll get the calendar invitation sent in a way that makes maybe more sense than I'm explaining right now. But we will not necessarily try to have this distinction, at least between these 3 and 4-hour meetings. I think they will be mostly at least 4. And then when we have some kind of program highlight, we'll just put that in as part of the agenda so that folks are clear what things look like in 2026 in your calendars. So that's my last thing. I hope I said that in a way that made sense. If there are any questions or comments, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I also wanted to thank Tabidi for covering for me for the first portion of the meeting while I had another scheduling conflict. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being here. Are there any questions for Brian?
All right, so just oops.
Hi, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right, I have to unmute, so apologize for that. But just clarification, Brian, those in-person meetings, June 11th and September 10th, those are the ones you were thinking to be off-site at some location, correct?
Yes.
All right, just wanted to clarify. Perfect.
Yep. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and move to an update from the Juvenile Justice Committee and the State Advisory Group. I'm going to pass it to both Molly Rogers and Anya Sakinian.
Hello. You're on. Awesome. Thank you, Paraso. For the record, this is Anya Sakinian with Youth Development Oregon. And the slide that you're seeing is outdated a little bit. I think we used that information during the last meeting, so there is no use to have State Advisory Group Juvenile Justice Committee slide on. So, yeah, thank you. So we will talk instead about juvenile detention guidelines, and I will pass it on to Molly Rogers, the chair of the Juvenile Justice Committee, in a moment. But just logistically, you all have received the latest draft of the guidelines, juvenile detention guidelines that we've been working on for about a year and a half by now. The Juvenile Justice Committee members were heavily involved in this work, as well as YDO staff and multiple partners. You also received the IA generated summary that I checked for errors. Just to ease the burden of reading the whole document, which is close to 200 pages now. So hopefully you've had a chance to review, and certainly those of you who've served on the Juvenile Justice Committee are very familiar with it. And today, our task is to put the guidelines to vote, and I will let the chair of the Juvenile Justice Committee, Ms. Molly Rogers, take over from now on.
Thank you. Molly Rogers, Youth Development Council, Chair of the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee. And Anya, thank you. This project has been an 18-month project, and it is actually one of our statutorily required duties. And so there are lots of things that we get to do as YDC that are in OARs or kind of fun, and lots of things that we want to do. And this is one of the things that we are mandated to do. And so we did not take that lightly, and started the process back almost 18 months ago with the original plan of just kind of doing a brush. And that's what we were gonna do, is just kind of brush them over, dust them off, and make sure that we were on task. And quite quickly what turned out is that we needed to go line by line. And so we literally went chapter by chapter, line by line, with input from so many partners. Many of the members of the Youth Development Council participated, members of System of Care Advisory Council participated, families participated, youth participated, Oregon Judicial Department participated, and I'm missing one. Well, and then on top of that, we have representation both on our Juvenile Justice Subcommittee, but additional partners that participated through the Oregon Juvenile Department Directors Association. And more recently, the juvenile detention managers were able to weigh in with specific things. And then at the retreat, when you guys got to spend some time on these, I really appreciated other council members. Shout out to Jeff Parker. That really is not an area that he typically works on, has participated. So what you saw in your inbox was the final version of the 6th edition of the Juvenile Detention Guidelines for the state of Oregon. The other part I would like to really talk about is that they came from really backgrounds for a couple different areas. So there are some national organizations that really lend and lead in juvenile justice, and those are the American Corrections Association, so the ACA standards, also through they have affiliate members, and then also through the Annie Casey Foundation and the International Juvenile Justice Association, who's now taking over kind of the best practices for the national and now international. And so really proud of the document that we developed, and would ask if there are any questions from the members before I think I get the opportunity to lean in with a recommendation for a motion.
Thank you so much, Molly and Anya, for the update. Any members of the council here have questions, comments? Before I ask for a motion, I just wanted to say thank you to the Juvenile Justice Committee, to all of our partners, to the team at YDO, council members who helped review and comb through this document and update the guidelines. I had an opportunity to review one of the drafts as part of the retreat, and it was really helpful to hear more about their process and evolution. And I'm really grateful for the work and the insights so we can continue to improve and elevate the standards for the different facilities and so forth. So with that, building off of what Molly shared, I would entertain a motion to adopt.
Hey, Prasa, Jeff Parker, council member. I move that we approve the revised guidelines as edited in the version that we see in the packet.
Thank you. Can we get a second?
I second it. The BD Lewis, I second it. Council
Thank you,
member.
Jeff, for the motion. Thank you to BD for seconding. Any questions or comments before we move to a roll call?
Hey, Parsa, Brian Detman. Just a quick maybe question to Melissa. Maybe it's assuming on quorum. Do we have quorum, Melissa?
We do have quorum. Thanks for checking.
Great.
Thanks, Brian, for checking. Thank you, Melissa.
Yep.
All right, with that, I'm not seeing any other hands for questions or comments. Melissa, will you call the roll?
Yes. Zan Ojro,
Aye.
Daniela Avila, Parasa Chanrani,
Aye.
Andrew Copeland, Yoselin de la Garza Hernandez Lopez,
Aye.
Jenny Glass,
Aye.
Alexander Robinson, Jeff Justison, I know Jeff is here. Jeff, if you maybe you can't unmute and let us know in the chat your vote. Nate Latanzio. Aye. Kim Lay. And the same. I know Kim is
Aye.
here.
There we go. That's
Thank you, Kim. Andy Leonard. Tabidi Lewis.
Aye.
Christina McMahon.
Aye.
Jeff Parker.
Aye.
Savannah Relatis. Molly Rogers.
Aye.
Hannah Schroeder.
Aye.
Janelle Theobald. That has 11 votes and passes.
Thank you so much, Melissa. So now we have the updated guidelines. Thank you again for participating in that vote. Now I'm going to be passing it to Yoselin and Alex for an update on youth days.
Thank you. I don't think Alex is here, so I'll go ahead. Yeah, we went to DC. It was the first time for me, and it was really great. I had really great conversations. We met with staffers for 4 groups, 3 we had meetings for. So Rep Salinas, Rep Dexter, as well as Senator Ron Wyden. And all of them were really receptive to the points that we were talking about and what we were elevating. We went to visit Senator Jeff Markley's office just to go say hi, and their staff was really welcoming, and they actually cleared their schedule and met with us. So we got a 4th meeting. As well as we actually met Representative Dexter in person. She showed up at our meeting with her staffers. But yeah, all the conversations were really well. Like I said, they were all very receptive, and a lot of the staffers and their reps and senators have already been working on some of the things that we called out and supported. So it was really great. I had a lot of fun going through the Capitol and going through the meetings and just being around. I got to interact with Alex a lot more, and it was really great. We kind of, after the first little spiel we had at the first meeting, we kind of got our thing down, and we were really it was really fun after that. And we also had I think it was the person from NYEC, Andrew Moore, which was really helpful on the day before, making sure that we were all practiced and knew what we were going to talk about. As far as the actual conference, that was also very insightful. There was a lot of youth and other reps from other states, and it was just really eye-opening to see the different things that people are working on, as well as the different issues that youth are facing across our nation, depending on what state. So that was also really nice to see and just, again, gain more insights. But yeah, I would say it was a 10 out of 10 experience.
Thank you so much, Yoseline, for traveling to DC and sharing more about your experience. It's super exciting to have those opportunities to advocate at the federal level, right? And to better understand the process and how we can continue to help influence how lawmakers understand the needs of our youth, and lots of work to do ahead. So thank you for sharing. Any other questions or comments from members of the council, or any additions from staff and YDO leads? Brian?
I'll just really quickly jump in, and perhaps others have comments or questions. But again, real sincere and deep thanks to Yoselin and Alexander. You know, we're being really careful with our resources, really needing to only put investment into what we deem to be essential travel, that's out of state. And I made the decision that this gathering of young people was important. Having some representation at an organization we've been a part of for the last several years. We won't spend much time on this today, but know that NYEC, the National Youth Employment Coalition, has asked us to author a couple of chapters in a book around educational reconnection and reengagement. I just saw an email from one of our team. Hey, Brian and Cord, you guys, review this by next Monday. So Oregon is being really seen as a leader in this larger conversation around re-engagement, workforce development and readiness and pathways. And so know that this is, I think really important for us as an agency, and we'll stay engaged, and to have a couple of council members represent us when in the past we've had more than a few and maybe a staff member or two, but this year we just sent two folks, and just appreciate the work part out, Yoselin. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian, for naming that and continuing to provide council members this opportunity. Just thinking about in the long run, our work and our impact, and also appreciate you highlighting the opportunity to continue to elevate the good work that's happening in our state on the national level, and have that be memorialized in a book as well. So thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to give an update on youth grants.
Thank you, Parissa. For the record, Paul Sell, Associate Director here at YDO. Appreciate everybody going to Youth Days, Yoselin and Alexander. I think it's a great opportunity to represent us, and as Brian and Parissa noted, being able to include some of the information around our grants and our work with re-engagement. Andrew Moore, so Yoselin, the person you were hanging out with, is actually writing the book, and so it's pretty exciting to be connected in that way. And I did receive an email from Andrew Moore after it, and he said our team was amazing. And it was like a 3-page email from Andrew Moore. So it's very exciting to see that work, and Oregon is I think really leading away with grant making around re-engagement and that connection, which does look different than quite a few other models across the nation. So Brian asked me to do a quick update on the youth grants. Apologize, I missed last council meeting, but I don't believe there's any slides because all of this is fluid at this point. Grant managers I think their schedules are pretty full right now, doing project plans, but just kind of to recap where we're at. So right now we have 3 major RFAs that have been completed, and we are in the awarding phase, which we've been going through. It is a lengthy process. But for re-engagement opportunity grant, those are our direct service re-engagement grants. We sent out 36 intent to awards this past summer. Currently, we have 33 of those grants executed. We're working on clarifying a couple of those remaining outstanding ones with insurance and other requirements around that. For those awards, they're totaling just over $8 million in awards to those 36 programs along the way. We have a 3-way tie for some partial awards in there, and so our process is if we get funds returned, they will go back to try to fully fund those partial awardees as we move forward. And just a note, the competitiveness of it, and I think Jared covered that. So that's that grant RFA. We had to cut off because we ran out of money at a score of 87 in that RFA. So highly competitive programming within that piece. JWR, or our Job and Work Readiness grants, we made the decision early on when we were unclear what was going to happen with the federal funding to allocate a specific specific amount of general state dollars or general fund, which is about $4.5 million to the Job and Work Readiness grants. So that actually put us at 19 awards. We did have one of those awardees decline because they had a shift in their programming and wasn't going to meet the scope of that. So within that grant, we're at 16 executed grant agreements. We have 1 partial awardee that is almost fully funded at this point. Just to note, the reason we have those partial awardees, sometimes at 1 to upwards of 3 or 4, is we don't have a tiebreaker in that process. So we equally divide that number, that remaining amount, based on their request to them. And then in community investment, so we're, as Brian noted earlier, we're going to actually have 2 funds within community investment. But within the community investment general fund dollars, that was just under $4 million or $3.7 million in awards, which resulted in 17 awards going out under general fund dollars, with 14 of those currently being executed. And just to note, executed means that the grant is fully operational and binding within that. Everybody signed and knows the rules within that. So with that, going back to kind of that scoring and that competitiveness, the JWR, the Job Work Readiness one, the score total cut off at 94.17. The community investment with the general fund dollars cut off at a score of 97, which is incredibly high within that. As Brian noted, we are anticipating those Title 20 dollars, and so I'm not at liberty to share what those grantees are at this point. We are still in process with that, anticipating grant agreements heading out probably the early part of January is our goal within that, but we do have some legal sufficiency and other work we have to do behind the scenes. But when we made that decision to specifically assign those general fund dollars, we also made the decision that we would use the same RFA from the community investment. So basically what happens is we will start where we left off when we ran out of money. So we will make the 2 partial awardee grants full and then go down the list until we run out of money again, which does result in about 25 additional awards within that. And to kind of put that in context, that actually levels out the scoring if we adding those 25 grants, the community investment award would cut off at 93.50 score. So you can see that those kind of balanced out within it. Some of the questions that I've had along the way is, why can't we put federal dollars to that Job and Work Readiness? We did not include it. The reason being is we did not include that as part of the RFA. And so there's some very specific language that is included with federal dollars. And so we made that decision early on to directly assign those federal dollars or Title 20 dollars to the specific community investment grant. It's easier in the context, I think, both for grantees as well as for us to manage that. Some of those Title 20 dollars doesn't fit well in the job work readiness aspect of it as well. So looking forward to the new year with coming out and hopefully getting to notify grantees of increased funding. I know I've met with many of those grantees that were not awarded, and so I think they're anxiously awaiting that information as well. I don't know. I want to turn it back, Cord, if I missed anything on the Title 20, or Brian.
No, I think you got it, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Questions?
Thank you so much, Paul. I think I'm anxiously awaiting to hear the update in January. I'm sure a number of prospective grantees are. So thank you again for the update and for you and your team's work on this. I just wanted to pause here to see if there's any other questions or comments from members of the council. All right. With that, I'm just looking at the schedule. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I wanted to check in with Brian and team. Technically, our break is at 11:20 for lunch and so forth. And so I just turn it over to Brian to check in about time, or do we want to try to power through one more thing before the lunch break?
Thanks, Parsa. Brian Detman, director for the record. Yeah, we're moving through. So I mean, my hope is maybe we could turn it over to what do you think about this? And if those of you in the room need a break, y'all need to tell us something about that. Those of us who are online, but either maybe we try to switch to Sally for Future Ready, and then Cord, you do your piece during lunch. And somehow that feels like in Sally, I don't know, yeah, a little earlier, than planned. But then we keep you at the lunchtime rather than going to you next. I don't know why. Somehow that maybe because it's a little potentially shorter, if I'm not
I also want to
mistaken.
defer to Cord and the opportunity
Yeah,
to have like a more
yeah,
in-depth strategic plan conversation. There
either
was
way.
a very friendly comment at the retreat that the strategic plan conversation sometimes gets cut short.
Yes.
Which is also to say that I'm expecting a robust conversation following my presentation and don't want to cut into Cord's time.
Cord, what do you think?
Sorry, I lost my mouse there. I'm okay with that swap. I don't actually have like a very long presentation. What we are hoping is that the folks who are at the retreat might have some more reflection. We hope for there to be some discussion. I do have maybe a little bit of follow-up from the retreat as well. But I don't have I've come to prepare for a very concise strategic plan update. So I'm happy for Sally to go forward. And if you generate a really lively discussion, that's terrific.
What do council members want to do? I can decide, but if there's a strong opinion, I want to hear it before I decide. Oh, Christina McMahon.
I would love to hear the Future Ready closeout report because that tease from Sally just has me very curious. And I'm sorry I didn't say my name, Christina McMahon, Clackamas County Juvenile Department.
Hey, Christina. Well, and yeah, so Sally, the only pressure on you then is I mean, we want robust discussion, but Cord, we will give you your time. So, I know we do such a great job with the strategic plan and so on. So, folks, in the room, Melissa, are we ready to roll?
So, but we did plan on like a 30-minute conversation. So did the folks folks need a break, like a quick break, and then we start? It's fine either way with me.
I can't hear or see what's happening in the room.
Parsa Chanrami for the record. I'm supportive of having Sally go now, and then we break at 11:20.
Yeah, it's Paul, you said something.
No, Molly was saying the same thing. Sorry. This
All right.
muting thing is fascinating.
Well, we can break when Sally and sorry, this is Melissa Gallardo for the record. We will break when Sally and discussion are over, I think.
Sweet. Go, Sally. Conquer.
All right. Whew, conquer. I love that. Sally Deck for the record. For those of you who don't know me, I don't know if there are folks in the room who don't know me. I am a grant manager with YDO. I was hired specifically to handle the Future Ready grants, and that is why I'm the one giving this presentation. Next slide, please. And I have notes on my other monitor, so if you see me looking away, that's what I'm checking. So in March 2022, so in a short session, the legislature passed a bill that was $200 million in workforce development. And we received about $10 million of that, the bulk going to HEC, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and BOLI, Labor and Industry. These were federal funds that were being appropriated and also supplemented and supported by some state general funds. Most of what happened with Future Ready was owned by HEC, that Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And a lot of their requirements are around reporting. And so the data that I'm going to talk about is some of the data that they have collected and been able to share back with us that our grantees submitted to them. And I say that as context because some of these pieces will be like, well, why, that's weird. Why'd YDO do that? And it's that we had a small piece of this large legislative support for workforce development. The major goals, again, for that $200 million package was about expanding who was participating in the labor force and then also aligning workforce development plans with needs across some specific industries in Oregon. So when you hear about Future Ready, when you're out in the world, you may hear it tied to healthcare, manufacturing, technology, or construction. And there were some caveats written into the bill for the youth programs that we were not tied to those industries and instead got to focus more on what we generally refer to as positive youth development and workforce development for those first or entry-level jobs. So we used the funds to pilot some grants that were focused on growing the existing community investment workforce readiness grants that we had been running for a number of years. We wanted that workforce development to continue to be tied to re-engagement and then also be able to tie re-engagement to paid work opportunities or some credentialing that would lead to career level jobs. In the past, we had offered programming that also included career exposure, and that would be for youth as young as middle school, being able just to know what jobs might be out there. And a distinction for Future Ready is that it really was about getting youth actually in a job, doing paid work, or in an industry recognized credential that would lead to a career wage. And so that's where, and the credentialing we'll talk about a little bit later because there were some lines that got drawn on that. Next slide, please. So when we got the funding, we had a very quick turnaround time, and kudos to the entire YDO team that got that to happen prior to my onboarding and hiring. And so quite quickly, we were able to get 26 grants out the door. A decision was made that those grants would be limited to just $150,000 because that was the threshold for some procurement rules. And it just meant we were able to process the grants more quickly by keeping them at that cap. Also, those grants, though they were, folks were able to backdate to July 1st of 2022, they really only had until the end of the fiscal year in 2023 to spend down. So small grants, quick turnaround time, and yet over 1,000 youth were served in that quick window, showing us that there was real demand for it, that it was already going to be successful, that there were folks who already had boots on the ground who were prepared to use these funds and get these dollars into the hands of youth, either through paying wages or paying for protective equipment or things like steel-toed boots if that's what a youth needed in order to participate in either their training or their actual job. So we then wrote the RFA for the 2023 to 2025 biennium, and that Future Ready RFA went out with the rest of the regular on-cycle RFAs. And had a little bit more lead time. We were able to award in all 11 regions of that regional solutions map that we award. So we had applicants and thus awardees in all 11 regions, a total of 32 grantees with a slightly larger maximum award. You'll see at the bottom of the slide that it shows that there were almost 1,400 youth served in the 2023 to 2024 year. So that's July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. The reason that we have that number is related to HEC owning the data and their annual data reports. So later this month, they will have completed all of their data analysis and they'll have their annual report available. But what we expect the numbers to be is at least as high as that 1,400 number, and could actually be yet higher because there were some new grantees who needed some time to get up and running, and would then have served more youth in the second half of the biennium than they served in the first half of the biennium. One of the cool things about these numbers is that, so again, the most recent numbers we have from HEC tell us how many people have been served through June of 2024. That's just the numbers that we have right now. At that point, 40% of all of the Future Ready participants were under the age of 24. So of the $200 million going out the door, we got dollars out the door really quickly, and we got youth served really quickly. Not all of the folks under 24 are within our programming, but the vast majority of them are. So kudos to all of our grantees that they were able to work this so quickly. Next slide, please. Looking at who was served, the bill included priority populations, and the intention was to target specific populations who were underserved in the workforce. So they were looking again at who needs workforce development across the state. And so some of the priority populations weren't aimed at youth at all. So veterans, specifically older adults, folks who have faced discrimination. And then also there were some tricky bits to some of the data collection. When we ask youth if they identify as LGBTQIA2 spirit, they might not feel comfortable telling the state that they do. So there might be some fuzziness to some of these numbers, but fundamentally what we see is that these numbers demonstrate a higher than average representation of underserved groups when we compare it to the numbers in the Oregon labor force, and when we compare it to the representation in the 2023 graduating class. So on the whole, these grants are getting to the youth who are furthest from opportunity, and that the representation of underserved and underrepresented youth our grantees did a great job with that. Next slide. Things that we learned. Those priority populations don't name, target, or draw attention to populations that YDO has historically recognized deserve that additional attention. So youth in the foster system, juvenile justice system, youth experiencing homelessness, that bottom point there around youth with educational supports such as 504 plans or IEPs. IEPs and 504s are the supports that exist in K-12 systems that either make it possible for youth to succeed or are an element that we recognize keep a youth in school. And so when we looked at why that is an important element of youth who deserve to be served and for whom it's a good fit with these grants, is that youth who had support, significant state support in K-12 are likely to need some additional support as they transition into the workforce or other post-secondary options. So that's where we just noticed, hey, this is a population that we should be paying attention to. The other piece was around the age range. Our grantees reported back to us that 14 and 15-year-olds were really hard to place in paid work, and that for some of the credentialing, there was actually an age requirement of 18 or older. So that would be like if someone is learning to operate heavy machinery, that the grantees were noting no one will take someone under 18, even if they're trained up, they aren't eligible to be like insured. And so offering those programs to younger youth doesn't make sense. So we took these learnings and we were learning this as we were working through these grants, and that these elements deeply informed when we wrote the Job and Work Readiness Grant that you'll see. The acronym is JWR. And we talked about it about a year ago when we were telling the council that these were our plans for our grants. And so this is kind of the wrap up insofar as helping it be clear what we knew going into the writing of that the Job and Work Readiness Grant, that it made sense for us to thoughtfully include the learnings that we had from the Future Ready grants. Next slide. Oh, one of the things that I'm like, why'd I put the lifeguards in there? One of our grantees was the Oregon Alliance of YMCAs. And because it was the Alliance that got the grant, they were able to portion out quite small grants, much smaller than our grants would be, to individual YMCAs to run lifeguarding programs. And the lifeguarding programs, that's another example of the slightly older age range, that 14 and 15-year-olds are not as targeted or as desired to be hired as lifeguards as the 16 and up. And I don't even know that there are very many places that would hire 14, 15-year-olds to be the lifeguards. And the lifeguarding training, one of a little testimonial here from one of the youth, and that is that lifeguarding has been much more than just a job. It's been a meaningful experience I'll carry with me for life. The training was intensive and rewarding. I learned not only how to handle water rescues, but also how to respond to a wide range of emergencies with calm and confidence. Those are skills I'm proud to have, and I know they'll stick with me no matter where life takes me. And so these are the pieces that we just kept hearing from our grantees, that the youth were appreciating the opportunities, and that in order to get into the training to get to be a lifeguard, the youth had to go through the essential employability skills training, where they would be learning what some people call soft skills, some people call like permanent skills around reliability, showing up on time, and being able to handle an emergency with calm and confidence. Next slide. Further learnings that we had, connecting workforce development to education is really valuable. So the workforce development participants, the youth, really benefited from having support to complete high school, obtain their GED, or get whatever their other training was that they needed. We saw youth benefit from that. And we also saw the organizations really benefit, that there were organizations that didn't understand, there were workforce organizations that didn't understand the depths of re-engagement and how some of those youth were being served, and vice versa. We had some re-engagement organizations that, when they got to learn more about workforce development, could better serve the youth. So people benefited, organizations benefited, and communities as well. We also recognize, we learned through this, that having the convenings, and you've heard us talk about them, really, really help connect those organizations and ultimately offer better support to the youth they serve. So those convenings are held twice yearly. We included basically everyone who was offering workforce development at any level and the re-engagement grantees. We held those twice a year. We have 4 of them through the state twice yearly. So we are at 8 of them each year. And we were also able to include some additional state agencies and some other partners. So System of Care came. We had training on upstream suicide prevention and what that meant and could look like. Those were all beneficial for workforce to be looped in to the conversation that we've been having with our re-engagement partners. Next slide, please. You heard me say a little bit about essential employability skills training. We intentionally left the curriculum quite open. So there is an Oregon employability skills curriculum that's been developed that is robust, it's free, it is a great program that we have seen organizations use. But we also recognize that culturally responsive curricula made sense also. We had a couple grantees that work exclusively with youth aging out of the foster system, and they have some specific needs and supports that make sense for those essential employability skills to be tailored to those youth. And so just in a nutshell, that was the most valuable, like positive youth development portion of those grants. And every grantee was required to deliver that part of the programming however they saw fit. And that's something that we built into the job and work readiness grants that are currently underway. The other piece in this feels kind of like stating the obvious, but we tested it, and it is true that wages incentivize youth completing their other programming. That we, from our perspective, we know that completing high school is going to lead to better results, like for the rest of their lives. But that if we bundle it and they are incentivized with work opportunities they're excited about, that helps them stay in school and finish their high school diploma or equivalent. We also recognize that the credentials need to be significant. So we had some organizations that were only getting their youth like a food handler's card or just CPR training, and that those by themselves weren't significant enough. In contrast, we had a couple organizations that had some pretty robust credentialing. Next slide, please. So this is one of them. So Youth 715 was a grantee both times. The quote is from Boys and Girls Club of Corvallis because those words match what was actually happening at Youth 715. Youth 715 is plugged into an industry and in an area where they are producing boats, like drift boats that need to be welded, and also trailers like you see in this picture. And so they offered a credentialing program in welding that was very popular and very successful. And one of the things that surfaced was that they recognized that when youth get to put on a welding helmet, the social dynamics change. And so this quote here from Boys and Girls Club is about that youth were really isolated and during COVID, and that really altered some of their social skills. And that when youth have the opportunity in a low stake situation to practice following instructions and working together and navigating the social elements, they're able to have better emotional and behavioral regulation, and that welding is an opportunity for youth to do that, and that the privacy of the welding helmet goes a long way in helping youth make whatever their next steps are. Next slide. It was so successful, other people did the same. So the photo on the left is from Impact Northwest, and the photo on the right is a young woman. There was also really great evidence that girls and young women could be included in welding programs with great success. That many of them were, like, not all, but maybe almost all, outpaced their male counterparts in their success in welding. And what more than one grantee staff member told me was, girls are just better at welding. And so there were these moments where these girls got this opportunity to try this. And so the young woman on the right there had never welded, got into the programming, had an absolute success, and is like on her way to a career as a welder. And that those are, when we're talking about living wage careers, that's what we're hoping for. And when we're talking about credentials that lead to living wage careers, these are the sorts of things that we hope for, that we then were able to build into the job and work readiness grants. Next slide. And this is my last slide before I'm going to turn it over and start asking you all some questions. So things that we have learned, that we've implemented, like from the Future Ready grants into the job and work readiness grants, are really around how can we combine positive youth development, so that would be a way to think about those essential employability skills, with workforce readiness, so that's getting them the skills that they need, or maybe it's the equipment or clothing that they need in order to have the job, with the educational component, so that youth who have not yet finished high school are able to engage in a meaningful way. So the goals for the job and work readiness grant are very similar to the original goals of the Future Ready grants. They're just refined to reflect youth needs and to include those elements around positive youth development and education, connection to education. So really looking at increasing opportunities for youth to have a readiness to work and like an enthusiasm and an excitement about it. And that for some youth, that's going to mean that they are using these opportunities to get their first ever job. And that sometimes you'll hear me talk about that as an A job because it's just any job, just a job. And then the B job would be a better job. And the C job would be the career. So we've got these ABCs of opportunities, and that some youth need to plug in at that A level. And some youth are going to show up in these programs, and maybe they already have their high school diploma or GED, and they are ready for either a better job. Maybe they've been working at Wendy's or wherever, and they're ready for something better. And that these are the grants that would be able to support them in making that next step. And that some youth are going to show up and they're going to say, I know that I want to weld, or I know I want to be in healthcare, and that they're ready to be on a trajectory to a career, and that these grants give them that opportunity to do so. Next slide. Discussion questions. As we think about the role of YDO in workforce development and how it can connect to education, how does it make sense for us to measure success both for us, and then also how might we think about measuring success of our grantees? Tied into that are these other two questions of what do we want to make sure that youth are achieving or learning? What are the opportunities we want to be sure they have? And does it make sense? Is it an easy way for us to learn these things, to have grantees come in with youth to be able to speak to the youth's experiences in these programs? And if so, what would be the interesting pieces for us to be able to talk about? With that, I will turn it to the group.
This is Parsa Chanrami. Thank you so much, Sally, for the presentation on the Future Ready grants. It's really helpful to see the data, both quantitative and qualitative, and then the program examples. And so with that, just wanting to open the floor for folks. Feel free to offer comment, questions, and then take a look at the discussion questions that Sally elevated as well. I see a comment in the chat from Zan. Exciting summary. Sounds like a lot of good learning. Thank you, Zan.
I know Molly Rogers, council member, Paul's waiting for me. He moved over to the screen just to wait for me. So I'm gonna lean in with curiosity. Great presentation. And I'm just curious at the retreat, I'm gonna go to the last question on your discussion questions, is if a grantee was to come to the council meeting with youth to share, I am curious at the retreat, did you guys talk about the council meetings and what that would look like, or is, because I don't want to repeat or change, because I did not get to participate in the first day of the retreat.
I'll just jump in. Brian Detman, on the director. I see Zan's hands up. We didn't spend specific time, Molly, on the sort of topic of workforce development readiness, but more generally, I think as we plan ahead, and I hope I'm answering the question, I think, and as we've done in some past meetings, right, having grantees come in, the opportunity is there. I guess I'll sort of say it that way, to have to either visit a place or have somebody come to us if for whatever reason, if they're in Salem and it's just, they're local. So the short answer is we didn't spend you didn't miss something on this specifically. But again, I think the opportunity is there. But I appreciate it. That's just my perspective. If other participants in the retreat want to jump in, please.
Parasa? Yeah, it looks like
from the retreat. It looks like Zan, did you want to offer something either in response or sort of general comment back?
Not in response to Molly's question, but just in terms of the general discussion questions, sure. If this is the right time.
Yeah, just wanting to check real quick, Zan, in case anyone else had something to offer in response to Molly before I pass it to you.
Parasa also, for the record, I'll jump in. The piece I would add kind of some context to that question. As grant managers and as staff, we get to see some of these programs. And so we don't really know what we're going to expect when we get there. And you're like, holy cow, this is amazing, right? We get that information. And so I think the question is a little bit of like, is there something intriguing for you as a council member that you'd like to see, whether join us at a convening or at one of the events that we're at, or if we want to bring it to the council. So it's probably a larger question that we want to just kind of like put out there of like, is there something you're curious about in seeing is really like, if you've ever seen a young person or a youth-centered welding lab, you can't beat it. Like it is crazy cool. So yeah, that I think is a little bit broader question. Peace on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I'm gonna pass it to you, Zan.
Okay, I'm gonna address the first question about outcomes first. And Sally, you alluded to several in your presentation, but what I would think that we would want to track closely is whether a youth accomplished the completion of their GED or a diploma, whether they received some more specialized credential or not, and then whether they actually have a job placement. And again, there's that ABC, the A job or better job or career track job. So it's not just tracking employment per se, but I think that there's some nuance there that we might want to try and capture if we could. It's the intangible is harder. That sense of self-confidence and ability to function well in the world and the emotional intelligence skills are invaluable. I don't know how we track those other than the fact that if someone's on that C track, that probably means that they've gained those skills, or maybe they had them when they came in. It's hard to know. So in terms of what I'd want to see, I think that Paul, it would probably be most valuable to go to a couple of these sites and to actually see how that skill building is being done, and to see the enthusiasm of the youth and hear those voices, rather than to have someone come and present a PowerPoint presentation at a meeting. So, and what we'd want to, I don't know, in terms of what we'd want to learn from it. I think it's more about how do you best connect? And again, Sally mentioned pay. That is a major incentive, and I think it's a no-brainer. But obviously, it's not just pay, because there are jobs that no one really wants to do.
Thank you, Zan.
Thank you, Zan. After Zan, I saw a question in the chat from Jenny. Jenny, did you want to ask your question out loud? If not, I'm happy to read it.
I mean, I can. I don't necessarily need to. It's there. So Sally, I don't know if you have a second to share a little bit more about local employer engagement on the grants, or if you can point me to more info.
Yeah, the short answer is it's messy with youth. One of the things that we talk about and where there are little snippets of success are where some organizations are big enough or they have inroads with a handful of employers, and they're able to basically train the employers to be ready for youth. So Tillamook YMCA Independent Living Program had that with the Tillamook Fred Meyer. And so the Tillamook Fred Meyer accepted job placements with the condition that the YMCA was paying the wages for the first couple of weeks, and then Fred Meyer would take over if it was beneficial. Right? That if the youth was happy to stay on at Fred Meyer and Fred Meyer was happy with what the youth had demonstrated in those first couple of weeks, then Fred Meyer would take over. But that was, I think, wholly contingent on the folks at the Tillamook YMCA and the folks at that Tillamook Fred Meyer, that they had that relationship. We also saw it down in Southern Oregon, that there were some really great connections between Douglas ESD and a variety of employers. And some of what they established and made happen was spectacular, but very difficult to scale or to like integrate into other communities. And that's the piece where what we're hoping for is that we can kind of broaden the re-engagement network of support and broaden that system so that it isn't just workforce development organizations, but that it would also be maybe school districts or large schools that would also be able to build some of those relationships, more than anything about increasing the number of adults advocating on behalf of the specific youth who are served in those programs, to say, oh, I can vouch that the youth in these programs have absolutely had training in X, Y, or Z, whether that's like welding credentials or childcare provider credentials, or simply I can vouch that this youth will arrive on time because I've made sure that their transportation is taken care of. Or I'm making sure that this youth is getting adequate hours, stipends, wages, so that they aren't asked by their family to go back to that A job, right? We have encountered a number of grantees who serve youth who are literally working in very low wage jobs in order to contribute to their families paying the bills. And so those are some of the places where we can potentially have an intervention that wage replacement stipends can be offered while the youth is upskilling to then be able to have a better job. So where employers plug into that can be tricky, but also is going to be pretty specific to where in the state it's happening. Small communities sometimes do it better than the big cities.
And so I'd add to that is one of the uniqueness pieces, like we get the question of like, how is it different than higher education workforce funds, workforce development funds, and the flexibility that these funds allow. I mean, we've had conversations with folks like, how is your how do you do these internships? Well, I just call Abe down the road who owns the company, right? And so one of the things that we're trying to do is to really allow these funds. Sorry, Abe, I don't know if you own a company or not, but that we allow the flexibility to meet the direct needs versus the large scale stuff. So we're not necessarily seeing as much direct connection to one industry. We're seeing it broader in context. The U715 example is they're teaching young people to weld aluminum, and then the employers are kind of taking it from there. So they have those like really unique conversations that are individualized a little bit more. So you just don't see the numbers, I think is probably the easy way to say it sometimes within it. And Jenny, I want to make sure we answered your question. We said a lot of words, but I want to make sure we answered your question.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Paul. Parsa Chanrami here. Just a couple of wonderings. I wonder if there are opportunities to sort of bridge our conversations from the retreat around youth engagement and youth grants that are led by youth in this conversation around workforce readiness. I could see some sort of through lines there potentially. Want to echo what folks shared for opportunities to visit with young people on site when they're in the program, just to hear the impact directly, because it's so different when you're in person. And just another wondering for me is, so you gave the example about the lifeguarding program. I wonder if there are programs that do sort of a junior lifeguard, maybe before they're sort of eligible to serve in that role. And then there's ways to do some sort of stipends, like pre-apprenticeships before the apprenticeship program, just to kind of make sure if the age range is targeting from 14 years old and up to reach 14 and 15-year-olds. Again, a wondering. I know there's a lot that goes into thinking about reach and support and so forth, but just wanted to offer those thoughts. And yeah, so thank you again, Sally. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Really quickly, and then everyone gets to take a break. Having that connection between workforce development and re-engagement, I think, is the answer for those like pre-apprenticeship, younger youth, early workforce development opportunities, and creating an awareness within the younger ages that are in the re-engagement programs, also within the community investment programs, for that awareness to be there and for the organizations to be connected, so that there can be that warm handoff when a youth is ready to move into their first job, that they're then able to, sorry, Paul's texting me while I'm talking. Paul, you're gonna have to hold your thought. Would be to be able to like create that pipeline so that youth can be completing their education and supported in that, and then also be working toward what their steps will be. Because to answer your question, yeah, I think that whatever the pre of lifeguarding is, that might make sense. Lifeguarding also is kind of a pre for EMT training, and there was an amazing program that had amazing like youth council direction down in Southern Oregon. Mercy Flights is the name of the grantee, and they're connected with schools all the way through the EMT training that's at the community college there. But that they absolutely were on my mind when you said the youth-led grants, that they are doing some really impressive youth-led work around like where they participate and what they get to do, that's within the parameter of what they're learning. So great work there. Paul, I'm just going to pass it to you. And if there's something that needs to be said.
I'm super happy this chair has wheels. My bad. I was just trying not to lose a thought. So my fault.
So you volleyed it to.
I shouldn't have hit send when you were talking. My fault.
I just thought you had something that needed to be said right now. All right.
Thank you so much, Sally. I know we're running a little bit over, but I appreciate your flexibility in being able to present earlier, just as we're making sure that we have time for all the different discussions. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Brian, because I think we're at a break for grabbing lunch and everything.
Yeah. Many thanks, Sally, and the rest of the grant management team. Awesome.
You wave like this.
Cord, Paul's waving his hand. Cord, thanks to, I know you were a key piece on that future ready stuff from years past. So okay, so wait, is it time
Just
to
want to verify? Just want to
Paul.
verify Zan did not have a question. She had her hand raised. We see it on the screen. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yep, there it goes down.
Apparently not. It went down.
Okay.
Went down.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sorry, Zan.
I think so.
No worries. I did see that, and I was like, "Is there?" Yeah, but Zan took it down. Thanks. So yeah, it's break time. Melissa, I don't know. What do you? Is it folks can pick up their little Lois, or maybe I don't know.
Sally has one slide for her presentation. So Tanisha, if you're ready you can put one more slide up for the end of Sally's.
And that slide could be up like while people are grabbing their lunch. It's just a cute photo and success story from a childcare provider training program.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic. It's a great slide to end on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And then folks can grab their lunch and then switch to Cord slides.
Yeah. Should we give 10 minutes, Melissa? Is that fair? And then we'll be back. Parsa, I see thumbs. Yeah. So 11:41, back at it. Thanks.
Hi, Melissa. Do you want to let me know when you'd like for me to begin?
Maybe Parsa can bring us back, Cord, and then,
Oh, sure, yeah.
or Melissa. Also, folks in the room. Yes, Melissa, etc. I don't know. Is everybody chomping?
I think I saw a thumbs up. It's for folks in the room. Okay, and Melissa said in the chat, Cord, we are ready to resume. So with that, it is 11:43 on December 11th, and we're opening the meeting back up for the Youth Development Council for an update on the retreat and strategic plan. So I'll pass it to Brian and Cord. Go ahead.
Thank you, Parsa. This is Cord Bucher, Deputy Director for the record. Yes, we're going to kind of do a combo here today, talk a bit about the retreat we had a couple of weeks ago, and also provide a strategic plan update. Those two things are closely connected, as we'll talk about in a bit, and as folks who were able to join us for the retreat will recall. So, first, thank you to everyone who was able to participate, in full or in part. That was a really, I felt like it was a really fantastic retreat, and would not be if not for the engagement and energy of the council members who were able to be a part of that. I think our first slide, if we want to move to the next one, is really just to open the floor up to you all. I guess I've got a little bit of an agenda here. We want to start with just some reflection on the retreat. And again, we'll kind of want to hear from those of you that were able to participate, and then talk kind of quickly about the highlights of what we did there. And then we'll share a progress report on the strategic plan, which is similar to something that we did share at the retreat, and just kind of give that to the full council here today. And then just talk about a few things on the horizon, what's coming. We'll look ahead. So the next slide after this, wanted to kind of start by asking those of you on the council who were able to participate, looking back on the retreat, what topics, ideas, or projects are resonating with you now? I mean, it may be the same things. Maybe as you kind of sat with all the stuff that we covered, there are things that you're now very excited about. Are there things you're wondering about? Do you have some questions that have come up then or since the retreat? And if for those of you who maybe weren't able to participate, or if there are things that that you missed out on in the retreat, as you hear what others are sharing, what's how do these things land with you? What do you want to know more about? What are you excited about? And so with that, I will open it back up to the council.
Thank you so much, Cord. Brian?
And Cord, I just want to jump in. I know we want to, council members want to hear from you. Many thanks, Cord, and everybody for coming. Staff who participated and led sessions, just kudos to you, and lots of staff engagement too was happening. And then I'll say, Cord's going to say this, but somehow it feels relevant now. We are going to do some work as a staff to kind of follow up on some of the things that came up. Cord will say more, but just know maybe some of the wondering is like, okay, and Cord has a what's next. So he said it. I'm just reiterating it. There's some stuff for us to jump on. I see comment in the chat.
Well, thank you, Brian and Cord. Jeff, did you want to speak to your comment in the chat a little bit more?
Just sure, yeah. I was so impressed with the detention guidelines process and the care that went into that, and I'm just excited that we got that across the finish line today. I am just super impressed with the team that facilitated that and worked on that. And then the other thing that, like, because it's the topic was what's the takeaway from the retreat, the thing that's still bouncing around in my brain, and that is how we really captured the intent of the money that we set aside for youth-led grant process. And I know Sally and the subgroup I was in, we had a really robust conversation around that. But I think we've got a lot of really fun work to do on that.
This is Kim Le. I echo what Jeff said with respect to I am both interested and wondering about the youth-led grants, partially because I came to realize that perhaps I didn't quite understand what that meant. And either way, whether it's grants that are intended to be distributed by youth or grants that were intended to be given to youth, either way, both of those are exciting to see what youth will do with them or what kind of projects will come from it. But I am wondering what the initial intent was and whether we do need to focus or clarify that intent so that the funds are being used the way it was intended.
Thank you, Jeff and Kim. Anyone else?
Nate Latanzio, council member here. Not specifically on the youth grant making piece. I wasn't a part of that conversation. I missed that piece. But one thing that I mean, granted I'm biased because I facilitated this discussion in part. But one thing that I just found, like, I mean, I was pretty excited about was just having the opportunity to talk about, like, I feel like, I mean, youth voice, I mean, we all know this can be thrown around like a buzzword in our field. And it's like, one understanding, like, well, what do we really mean by that? And like, what does like look like to meaningfully engage young people? And like, just being able to like facilitate that in like a discussion oriented format, I just found to be really valuable. Like, I think it'd be one thing, and granted, I did do my share of talking and lecture on like, hey, this is just sharing some food for thought on youth voice and different approaches, the ladder of youth voice, really the scale of what it can look like. But I just found it exciting that like on a scale like this has been something that I know for myself and like others at the organization I work at, Youth Air, like it's just really exciting to hear. It's like, how do you make systemic impact in terms of supporting young people and specifically looking at like grant making for young people, so specifically the youth grant making, or just overall the RFA process. Like, how are young people engaged in that? How is it responsive to youth voice? Like, that's really how you like impact the system, and just knowing like all the potential opportunity that we have going forward with these things in the back of our mind. Like, okay, how are we involving young people in these processes? Where does it apply? Where does it not apply? And just having that be an active consideration, I just found to be really valuable. All that to say, I really enjoyed having that opportunity to facilitate the discussion with folks, and just I'm excited to see about everywhere it goes.
Thank you so much, Nate. Anyone else want to share? Real quick before I turn it over to Cord, I just wanted to echo what Nate, Kim, and Jeff had elevated, and Nate's presentation on youth voice and engagement continues to resonate with me as a member of the council, and looking forward to hear our next steps around the different scopes of work. I felt like the structure of the retreat was really engaging overall, and want to give kudos to the whole team at YDO for organizing and facilitating the retreat. We also had incredible turnout, and my hope is next year we'll build in time for a group photo. We missed an opportunity for a group photo, but hoping next year we'll have that opportunity in November. But again, kudos for just the intentionality in how it was organized, and just keeping the momentum moving forward. I felt very energized and inspired coming out of the retreat. Thank you. And just want to lift up the comment from Tabiti about youth agency and voice. Kudos from Zan as well. Tabiti and Zan, did you want to share anything verbally? If not, I can pass it back to Cord.
No, I talk too much. So.
You do not, Tabiti. Thank you, Tabiti. Thank you, Zan. Back to you, Cord.
All right, thank you. Cord Bucher, Deputy Director. I I was looking ahead in the slide deck, and the next slide, what would have been the next slide, got deleted by me probably when I was doing some last minute updates. Because it's there from the version from like late last night, but it's not there now. And that slide was just a quick summary of the topics that we talked about, and I was going to share that, and I'll just share it orally and talk a little bit about some of the survey feedback we got from those of you who've completed. We sent out a survey to council and staff just to kind of rate the retreat as a whole and kind of how you felt about the different breakout sessions and workshops that we did. So just the quick recap, on day one, we had a youth leadership and voice conversation with Sally and Paul from the YDD team and Nate from the council, collaboratively presenting. I did a strategic plan update, which I'm going to share a little bit of that information in a moment. We also had our first set of breakout sessions. And I can actually, it looks like the sharing is down, so I will quickly share my screen because I went back and did a version search really quickly, and I've got the slide now. So hopefully folks can see now my sort of opened PowerPoint here. So we had on just the workshops, day two, we had a tribal traditional practices presentation from Caroline Cruz from the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. And we also had some partner agency overviews from the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission and the System of Care Advisory Council. Wes Rivers from ADPC and Anna Williams from SOCAC. And then a list of the breakout conversations here. And so each of these breakouts, staff facilitated. There was one on youth-led grant making, which has generated a lot of discussion both at in the breakout sessions and subsequently among staff. Youth council member recruitment, the juvenile detention guidelines, which was a great opportunity for us to share that and get more feedback from you all. Designing the Youth Development Oregon grant impact brief. So this is something we have in the plan. We want to sort of develop a model for how we share, essentially policy briefs or impact briefs about our grant programs. Talked a bit about community engagement and planning for our next round of community engagement. And then we had a conversation about guiding questions for data collection. And I think, if I participated in both the youth-led grant making breakout as a note taker and the data guiding questions presentation as one of the facilitators. So I was in those through the 3 sessions of each. And I would say that in my experience, and I think this would be true through all, that so many different threads of conversation popped up, even in the 15 minutes that each conversation had. Particularly around, for example, youth-led grant making. I think we heard really different interpretations of that and came up with different possibilities for how we more strongly engage and support young people in our grant making processes. And likewise in the data guiding questions, there was a lot of different ways that we talked about how we are collecting data and how we might measure success for our grants. And so these were really meant to be, sort of starters, really kind of spark some energy around these. Each breakout session was connected to a project in the strategic plan. Folks may recall in the agenda and in some of the materials for that retreat that each of these we identify, okay, this particular breakout is related to a specific project in the plan. Likewise, all the workshops connect with projects in the plan. So something that we tried to do is to really orient the retreat topics around the strategic plan, which I think folks responded to that, and we'll continue to do it that way. I think that really helps us to make sure that we're connecting what we're talking about with the work we've set out to do. I've got like a messy spreadsheet, so I'm not going to share that. I'm going to go ahead and just go look at it, and I'll just report out some of the numbers because I'm still kind of learning how to use the Microsoft Forms tool, and it builds a spreadsheet for you where you get all of your results. And then I've had to do different things to try to get like average scores and stuff. But what I can see is that overall, those of you that gave feedback gave very, very positive, favorable feedback, which we of course appreciate. Overall, I think our average overall score is like we had 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. No one gave us any 1s anywhere, which we really appreciate. But we did get mostly 4s and some 5s on the overall, which I think is great. We love some room to improve. So the average score overall was 4.27, which I think is great. But among the breakouts, the one that had the highest number of fives was the day one breakouts, which I think really speaks to how engaging that those conversations were. A few folks also in the comments shared mentioned the in-person time being really valuable, and I think that I and Nate were the hybrid participants in that day one activity. So I didn't get to really get a sense of what it was like in the room, but by all accounts, the energy was really great on day one. And I think that those breakouts were at the end of day one, so I think it was sort of a crescendo, and the ratings in day one steadily increased. So the first the youth leadership and voice session 4.58, the strategic plan 4.58, 4.64 for the youth leadership and voice, 4.69 for the breakout sessions on day one. So, I mean, all very close. That I think those scores represent people generally saying this was outstanding, and everyone really, I think, liking it. Our overall scores are a little lower on day two, and I suspect it's that I think there was a little bit more. I see more folks who were not able to attend everything on day two, and I think with the virtual, that's both a blessing and a curse. It gave a lot more flexibility for people to participate as they were able to, but I can see where maybe if you were able to come to like the first thing and then you missed a couple of things and came back at the end, maybe it doesn't feel quite as rich. But again, the scores on day two are broadly very favorable, and we have some, I think, feedback that is really, I mean, like the staff feedback is really interesting because I think a lot of us use this as an opportunity to reflect on how we might have planned differently or done things differently, and we're again thinking about that. But there's a piece here that I'm going to talk about something that was shared by one of the council members that I think is really good, kind of a tip for us of a thing that we should be doing next. And it was, I'll just kind of quote just a section of it, that there were a lot of great ideas coming from the group, and it would be great if there was a follow-up summarizing the next steps for all of us to take. And I think that is something that we can do. And I think that one of the challenges was there was so much conversation and there were so many different things that even at the end of day two, as we kind of identified what people wanted to focus on as their own personal next step, it's sort of all over the place. And so, as Brian mentioned, I think the staff's work now is just still some, making sense of all of this and figuring out how we push that work forward. And so, I will actually maybe go a little out of order in the slides. And Tanisha, if you can bring the slides back up where they were at, I'll maybe push us forward and talk about next steps. And then I'll come back to the strategic plan update just to maybe finish the retreat conversation and then just talk about the strategic plan for a minute. So this is the progress report, and we can come back to it. If we can, Tanisha, move forward, maybe one more slide. Oh, go ahead. It's actually a lot in here. So let me, one more after that. Yes. Okay. So where we're at now. So I did not put a bullet in here for it, but in a week, the staff is meeting. We have our monthly staff meeting, and our plan is to actually dig back into the breakout topics and do some work on fleshing out what we've heard, what we've got on our notes, and how do we sort of develop a plan to keep this stuff moving forward. I think that some of it is really work that we will bring back to the strategy committee. Similar to the last one, I'm going to try to schedule it with when we've the folks who are kind of the core council members who volunteered to participate in the first strategy committee. I'm hoping you're our permanent members, and we're going to invite you to let us know your availability. But all council members are invited, and we are going to send that out to try to schedule something in February prior to our March meeting. So we'll be bringing some things back to that committee, but I think that we also want to go back to both the Juvenile Justice Committee. I think now that the juvenile detention guidelines are done, we can look at some of the projects that were next on their list. The Youth Committee, as I understand it, has been doing more sort of individualized work, but hopefully we can come back together. And it may be that some of the breakout topics are are really more sort of centered in the, in a specific, and maybe the youth committee is looking at youth-led grant making, for example. That was, I think, one of our goals with that. Whereas other stuff might be more at the strategy committee level, or even asking, is this something that we need to, set up some kind of a work group or other opportunity for folks to come together on it. But essentially, the next step is staff has to work to bring this back to you, and we can provide what was, I think, alluded to in that comment I shared earlier from the feedback, which is, here's what we've got, here's how we see us moving this forward, here are the next steps and ways for council to plug in. And then I think, yeah, so I specifically named youth-led grant making because I think that one was the one where there were the most questions about what that looks like. And I think some stuff emerged that expanded the idea a little bit. So that's one where we particularly kind of see us needing to come back to the council and say, okay, this is what we understand as the charge. This is what we want to focus on when we understand youth-led grant making. But I think that there are other opportunities to broaden youth involvement in both the application evaluation process, perhaps in the application process itself. How are we hearing youth voice in, proposals? And I do think a youth-led grant making process using the funds dedicated for that gives us an opportunity to pilot some of those ideas as well. So essentially, we'll be coming back with a strategy committee meeting date in a couple of months. And we can also share out some updates probably ahead of that, just for all the council to see where we are at and what we'll be discussing in that session. And then I'll work with the other committee staff to figure out how we can also have strategic plan conversations in the juvenile justice and youth committee settings and talk about the topics that are most important to those groups. Before I go back to kind of talk about some of the strategic plan progress more broadly, any comments, questions from the council?
Cord, just a thought from me on how we're reporting progress on the different projects. I think it might be in like a future update be helpful to note that, not all the projects are equal in weight. And I think being really clear about the projects that are prioritized based on our timelines and so forth, it could be helpful for especially newer council members to track into that. And that also helps us give feedback on like based on the projects we're prioritizing, right? Here's our progress on track, in progress, on pause, and so forth. So I just wanted to ask for that level of more detailed information because I do think that that would be helpful as we help provide, feedback and guidance as a council.
Right. Thank you, Parasa. This is Cord Bucher. I think that's very doable. Tanisha, if we could go back, or before I do, are there any other questions or comments?
Hey, Cord, Brian Detman for the record. I appreciate Parasa's comment, to be your written comments in the chat. And so just to sort of summarize, right, we're going to meet as a staff. It's in the next week, or maybe it's following. So we'll be able to bring ourselves together and make sure there's clarity come to strategy committee and some other committees, juvenile justice, youth. The youth-led grant making, I just want to be real specific to Kim's point and maybe others. This council voted in September to basically, I don't know what the right word is, to have our youth committee come up with a sort of plan for 120, I think it's $120,000 that we have in the past used in a different area, but we said, hey, y'all take this $120,000 and design in consultation with staff kind of what that could look like. So as a priority, we are what, an eighth of the way through the biennium. So that is really, we want to get that moving because we need, I mean, those dollars are good through the end of the biennium, but we'd like to get them out into communities, to young people, to com families, whoever we decide. So as a critical next step, for me, we need to get those dollars, we need to get our youth engaged in some individual conversations and some group conversations to get those dollars moving. So that is a critical charge that we will take on. And it's really specific to how do we get these $120,000 out the door, so to speak. And some of the ideas that came up in addition, I think are things that we will need to engage in a, I don't know, deeper, longer conversation, kind of maybe to parse it to your point, like those things may happen over time. Nate, to your point, like it's the bigger questions about really elevating and honoring youth voice. So it's a both and, but priority number one is youth committee. We've got these dollars we want to get out in the community. What can we do? What's possible? Paul's going to be critical of that conversation. Sally, from a staff, Sally in particular, to at a staff level, and so more to come. Um, but for me, that's, I don't know if it's priority number one, but it's a thing that we want to drive. And so I'll just stop there just so that everybody's clear on kind of that next step for those dollars.
Thank you, Brian and Cord, Parsa Chanrami here. Any other questions or comments for Cord from the council, or any additions staff would like to make?
Parasa, Paul Self for the record, and just to kind of echo what Brian's saying is I think the conversation around youth grant making, I found amazing. I was not in that breakout because we were talking about community engagement with Brian and I. So, but I appreciate Brian's clarity and kind of moving that forward. I really do think that it is what I took away from at least talking with staff leading that conversation is we have some opportunities to really look at things as we move forward, and kind of that North Star of like this idea that came out of that conversation is really amazing. And I think it's going to push us. And I'm excited about that, to be honest. And we're going to have to kind of take it in increments. So I don't want people to feel like that conversation is missed, because I think it will start driving some of our work. And I mean, the small amount that we're working with does allow some flexibility within it versus, a $300,000 grant, which is very different. So just wanted to add that to the conversation. Anything in the room?
Thank you, Paul. And however we can help, if members of the council aren't serving the youth committee, I just want to extend however we can help support as a council in moving the youth-led grants forward and so forth. That's in being in thought partnership on next steps. Another plug for the strategy committee here. So I want to just continue to reinforce that if you haven't signed up for a committee, please do, because lots of important work happens in these committees before key decision points get elevated to the council. So thank you to the team for their work on many of these different scopes.
Brian Detman, real quick, Price, to that point, and Melissa, I don't know, somebody did ask in the meeting, we were tracking, hey, what committees am I on or not on? And I don't know, Melissa, if you have something to share, if we need to send it via email or get to it at the end of the meeting, but we did hear the question. And there's both an opportunity to add yourself to a particular thing if you're still not, but Melissa, I just don't want to forget that we wanted to at least provide folks with some information in that regard as a follow-up from the retreat. I don't know, any quick thoughts, Melissa? on timing, or can we do that later today if we have time, or how do we want to do it?
I don't have the summaries of the of the committee membership right now. We did take all of that, like what I have were some of the other questions about when are council members terming off, and Brian and I have looked at like the SAG requirements and things. So we've started delving into some of the other council membership questions, and I haven't gotten to the committee part yet, but that's on the list.
Okay.
That's part of the answer to the bigger questions out of the retreat.
Okay. We'll more to come. We'll, as we meet as a staff and whatever it is, the 18th, I think we can jump into that and get back to you, council.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Melissa. Cord, is there anything else you had for us on strategic plan?
Thank you, Parsa. This is Cord Bucher. Yes, I'm just going to quickly share the summary of just the progress report. I shared this at the retreat, but I'll I think it's maybe slide 11 where there's the pie chart. Amazing. Thank you. Has only slightly changed from what we shared a few weeks ago, in that I had noted there were 4 projects that were just on hold because the just changing circumstances, that they might just not be feasible. And one of them was kind of really how we're sharing our work kind of on the national stage and sort of the policy arena nationally. And we kind of envision that as like, presenting at conferences, which, as Brian noted earlier, is something that we're really looking at potentially paring back given just our fiscal reality. But someone in the retreat pointed out the fact that we were getting ready to submit some chapters for the re-engagement book, the new edition, which I think is an amazing way to contribute to the national conversation on that topic. So we've noted in the progress tracker that project might actually look a little bit different than what we originally envisioned, but certainly publishing, about our work is, I think, really, really valuable, and perhaps has a greater reach than just presenting at a conference. So the other things you see here. So there were 8 projects that we noted as complete. The majority of those were things that we identified, in the development of the plan that were just kind of timely. A lot of it around the RFA. Some of those things got implemented the spring, summer, and early fall. There are 25 things that we have started. Those include things we talked about at the retreat. And then there are about 30 projects that are not started. And just to kind of go back to what Parasa mentioned earlier, that I think where we talk about like weighting and priority, I think both among the things that are started, there's stuff that is long term that is not going to get done soon. There's stuff that I think we can push hard and or is timely, needs to be done soon. Of those things that have not started, I think that's where we might look and say, okay, like now, some months later, or even, sometimes those ideas were generated a year or so ago. Do these still feel like things that we, how important is this stuff? How much weight does this still hold for us? And I think that's a great conversation to maybe have in a strategy committee setting. And I can, we can share a more detailed report of the overall plan progress, when we come together then. The next slide, I think, is the, kind of identified what were the priority projects in the plan. And just noting that like all have begun work. The only one that I don't think we formally really started was there was a notion about establishing kind of a guest participant model. And I think there's still just some like thinking to do about what we mean by that. I think that there were some ideas around bringing young people to the council meeting, about council members inviting and bringing guests with them. I think there are a couple of ways to interpret it. I think that for the youth committee, we've actually had some less formal conversations with some youth who are not yet members of the committee. And I think there's maybe an opportunity to just, how do we introduce our work to youth who might be interested in joining, and creating informal spaces for that. So that one's one that's, I think, still needs a little bit of clarification in how we move it forward. But the others, there are some notes here. A lot of them were things that we discussed at the retreat, or either initiated through a breakout conversation, or continued to move forward. There's a couple of projects that are really being teed up. I mean, there's a couple for the Juvenile Justice Committee that are, I think, kind of the next things to come after the detention guidelines now being adopted. So the priority projects, weren't necessarily all thought of as these are the things that are the perfect starting place. But because we identified them, we've really tried to figure out ways to get the ball rolling. And so it's exciting to kind of see these things moving and to be at various stages of underway. There are two more slides that are just kind of some summaries of things that we've accomplished, but I think in the interest of time, I'm okay with us, unless Brian, you think we need to kind of revisit that. A lot of it we've already shared, both at the retreat and some of it even at the previous council meeting. So I would say that with that, Parasa, I can wrap it up and answer any other questions. Otherwise, pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Cord. Did you want to pause here briefly to see if there's any other questions or comments from the council? Okay. So with that, thank you again, Cord. I just want to pause here to see if there's any other questions or comments. For folks in the room, in person, I may need you to unmute because it is a little bit hard to see if you have your hand raised.
We're good.
I think we're good.
Thank you. All right, folks online here. All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Cord. Really appreciate it. Any final comments before we pass it back to the team for committee updates? All right, seeing none.
Oh, sorry, were you asking me?
Yeah.
No, I have no further comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cord. I always like to check. All right, I'm going to be passing it over to Paul to provide an update from the Youth Committee.
All right, well, thank you, Parasa. Paul Self, for the record, giving a brief update on our youth committee work and might ask me to jump in as well in that. So one of the things that after our last meeting, we sent out a survey to all of our youth committee members asking kind of some, when we could meet, what kind of focuses it are. And it really surfaced that that's really hard to find a common time for us to meet in a public meeting sense within that. And so we made a proposal to the youth committee members that myself and when we have the permanent position hired, will come and individually just engage to get to know our young council members, learn a little bit about it, and tying it into that strategic plan, I think is really important, because one of the things about this grant making process in the youth committee is there's a lot of things that are not terribly exciting, but critically important in grant making that we have to abide by with the statutes, all the rules and regulations. But I see a lot of heads nodding. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of that. That's a piece that myself and whoever's in that permanent position can really help manage that. So getting this understanding from our young members of our council is critically important to kind of design a template and then engage further with it. So in that concept of time, recognizing that, yeah, Brian, we are just past that end of that first quarter. So we are going to be, we have a timeline in terms of that money having to be spent by June 31st, 2027. I'm looking at Abe. Yeah, I got a head nod, making sure I had the right year of that. So we're going to try to do that this spring, moving into getting some of those grants out in the summer, which is also a benefit in the sense that procurement is not as busy. So there is some strategic planning on our side with the agency work, but trying to make sure that happens. But I do want to turn it over to Nate, because one of the things that and if you're okay with it, we talked about in the youth committee is instead of me or whoever's the staff member with it, to give a volunteer from the youth committee to share out a little bit about what's happening.
For sure, thank you so much. Nate Latanzio, council member speaking. I know that's a lot of what the conversation has been is around like, how do we especially with the long-term focus, the long-term in focus, what would be the best way to shape a youth council? I mean, that's what my full-time work is. And what I say is that or at least from my own experience, what I found is it requires a lot of the traditional structures of what a committee may look like would need to be just actively considered and reconsidered in alignment with what youth culture looks like in terms of it's going to need to be quite relational. So exactly having the investment of having a full-time position, connecting with the youth council members just to really establish that relationship, I think is going to be just really important. It's especially at the beginning and ongoing. And then it's certainly a balance here. I know this is something that we talked about at the first council meeting, is like, it's tough in like trying to figure out if we're gonna have a space for young people. It's like, okay, do we start with like nothing and then have, because we want it to be youth led and youth created, like, I guess, like, where is that balance of like, what do we prepare beforehand? What is the representation of adults with young people? How do we kind of like, how are we defining what young people look like? All of these things, like, I feel like it's important that we try a lot of different strategies, like how we're trying this like more one-on-one model to be able to just build that rapport and really just flush out what this can all look like. As what was my point that I was going to there? I had it and then it like left my brain there, right as I was like building up to it. But essentially what I'm trying to say here is that creating and tailoring a space for young people, and hopefully by young people as we get to that place, like it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take a lot of responsiveness to the group of young people that are in there. Because like, I mean, I mentioned youth culture earlier. That's just a very like broad stroke term, but there's a lot of nuances within that, and a lot of it's gonna be determined by the young people that join that committee. So all of that to say, I think it's gonna take some time, but I think having the approach that we're taking now, where it's quite a bit more relational, and we're just being considered like all the different like influence factors where youth voice plugs in, now that we've had more conversation on fleshing out what can and should that look like, will really like pave the way for what this looks like down the line. And especially like you mentioned in terms of like, I don't know if it's a deadline, but the time that we're looking at for having that grant, the youth-led grant making, having those dollars spent, that seems very much realistic. Even given that this takes time to build, that sounds like a very realistic timetable.
Awesome. Thank you. I think one of the biggest things, at least from my takeaway when we did the survey originally, is I'm paid to be here, right? And so we can invest some different time, staff time, to take that burden off of our young committee members, in the sense that, I mean, getting together for lunch is very different than coming and meeting, and if we can take that burden off is the intentional in our kind of next steps. And yeah, I think it's going to take time. That is one of the things that I very clearly heard in the last meeting. Any other youth committee members on the call, or Sally, I know you joined, or Abe, have any comments to add? Okay. So just a kind of brief piece, we are looking to finalize that permanent position here, hopefully in the next week or so. We're well into that process. Once we get that rolling, so youth committee members, just be aware that we will be reaching out, working to schedule those times again as we move forward. Thank you. I'm supposed to mute, sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna mute myself, not the screen.
Thank you so much, Nate and Paul, for the update there. Really appreciate the work in thinking long-term around what does meaningful, high-quality engagement look like, and understand that it takes time, and looking forward to hearing another update at a future council meeting. With that, I'm going to pass it to Cord for our next committee update on strategy. Although I feel like we kind of got the update from you a moment ago, so I still want to offer you the opportunity because it's on the agenda.
Thanks, Parsa. This is Cord Bucher. I'll just use this to just again thank the folks who participated in the strategy committee meeting in the fall and helped to develop the agenda and the goals of the retreat. Because I mean, hopefully, Parsa, you were there, and for the others, that I hope that what we ultimately came up with reflected that. I mean, we heard a lot of emphasis on youth voice and really tried to find a way to incorporate some focus on that. There was a lot of ideas that I feel like we were able to sort of bring and synthesize. So that was really, really very helpful. The next strategy committee meeting, I think what we can do is just send the sort of date poll to everyone. We would probably prioritize the scheduling around ensuring participation of those folks who've already kind of identified themselves as committee members. But we would love to have as many folks as want to be a part of that committee, and you can also be a part of more than one. And so that will be coming out. So we'll try to give folks at least a month or more, advance notice of when what dates we're looking at, and find the one that gets the most folks connected who want to participate. So we really, again, appreciate that space as a way to, again, do some of this more focused work on strategic planning and then bring things back to the full council. I think that does it for my update. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cord. And I also want to appreciate folks who have been able to serve on the strategy committee. I also have noticed a difference based on the feedback we've given the committee and how that has shaped a council meeting, like our quarterly council meeting, and building in visits, for example, within the time frame of the council meeting. And then also seeing the improvements for the structure of the retreat. So thank you again for being so responsive to that feedback. It looked like the room unmuted, so I'm going to pass it to the room. Go ahead.
Nate Latanzio, council member here. I just wanted to share out someone that did volunteer to join the strategy committee. I don't know if it's helpful, but I did want to share that if there are any new council members that are joining in, similar to I would still say I'm still in that boat as I'm learning the processes, but if you're new and you feel a little out of water, I found, at least for myself, attending the strategy committee, being that, it is new, but within that, it's helpful in terms of getting to figure out where your footing is and having a greater understanding of the system, because that strategy committee is talking about the how and why behind all of the processes that we're trying to build fluency. And so I just figured I'd throw that out there. If there's anyone new like myself that's really just trying to learn a little bit more, it's a pretty cool spot. Cool space. My gosh, if I can talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. All right, and with that, I think we're still ahead of schedule, but we're at the point where we can open up the public comment process. Before I do, checking in with Melissa Gallardo about whether or not we've had anyone signed up to testify.
Today. Thanks, Parasa. This is Melissa Gallardo for the council and for YDO. I have not heard from any guests attending if they have any public testimony to give or any public comment. I'm looking to see if anyone's going to raise their hand at this point. If so, this is the time. And I don't see any, so I'll give it back to you, Parsa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for checking. And then with that, just looking at Brian, is it all right if we just move forward to meeting, closing out with comments and next steps?
Yes.
Okay, passing it to you.
Thank you again, Brian Dutman, for the record. Thanks, Parsa. Thanks, everybody. Looks like we're gonna get you out a little early. Just appreciate you all, those who are in person and those online. We've got some critical next steps, key next steps. Obviously, Melissa and I will connect to make sure everybody's kind of aware on the committee piece. So we'll get you. She and I will talk. I think at the very least, send an email that just says, okay, here's what we understand. And take Cord's invitation, Nate's affirmation that there's opportunity to also engage. Our Juvenile Justice Committee has had engagement consistently, and so we just want to continue that. And speaking of the Juvenile Justice Committee, Molly, you are technically at the end. But I'm going to ask you, Molly, I'm just going to ask you publicly if you would pretty please come to our next meeting, because you and I should touch base about finding a replacement. But I'm going to take this as an opportunity to thank you, and I'll do it again, but your leadership of the Juvenile Justice Committee, your leadership in juvenile justice generally, helping us find, I'm going to say probably multiple council members, but one of whom is sitting here now, and Jeff Justison, So while you're technically at the end of 8 years, what often I will say to folks is, hey, stay just a meeting more or two until we find your replacement. So I'm going to ask you that humbly. We can connect offline more, but just so much great leadership over your 2 4-year terms as a council member. So I don't know, as a wrap up, I just want to say thanks. I don't know if you want to say anything. Yes, big. I don't know, Molly.
I'm good.
Yeah.
We got the detention guidelines.
What do we do? Go up.
Awesome. I know, Molly. You know, I talked about some
Yeah.
replacement ideas, so I'll follow up with you. So I just want to also wish everybody happy holidays. Yeah, it's early December, but wishing everybody the best to stay safe, stay warm, stay fed. Um, if you're going somewhere and taking some time away, just be safe, travel safe, enjoy time with friends and family, as I know you all will. Um, yeah, I think the biggest next step or wrap up too is just to take advantage of the time you have over the next days and weeks ahead to get some rest, get some kind of replenish, re-energize yourself, however that looks for you. So a deep thanks and appreciation to our staff for pulling all this stuff together as they do. Yeah, happy holidays, everybody. Yeah, Parasa, that's all I got. Kick it back to you, to officially adjourn.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian, for the closing remarks. Also want to echo the thanks to Molly for her service as a member of the council on the Juvenile Justice Committee. I've really learned so much from working alongside you and your thought partnership. So thank you for your continued service. And hopefully you can stay on a little longer as we, figure out what transition planning looks like. I want to appreciate the team at YDO in preparing for this meeting and supporting council members. And thank you for the council for spending a couple of hours with us today and your service as part in serving youth around the state and in this grant making role as well. So thank you again. We hope everyone gets some good rest and time to recharge this holiday season. We're going to give you the gift of some time back today and looking forward to seeing all of you in the new year. Thanks again.